Hello there. My name is Chris. Welcome to day 2 of the Robinson Violin School free course. Today we will be talking all about developing tone quality. Okay, so tone quality, sound production, it's all dealing with the bow arm, how we're moving the arm, specifically some very simple mechanics that really affect our tone quality or sound production. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into that today. I'm super excited. So grab your violin, grab your bow, and let's dive in. Okay, so here we are ending to developing tone quality. Okay, so here we go. These are the things that we're going to be talking about today. So why beginners struggle with tone quality. Talk about that. The three ingredients to a beautiful sound. There's three really specific things that we can do to create sound and to change it and improve it. How to use the bow more effectively, and how to create a smoother, clearer sound. Okay, so we're going to go through all of these things today. So follow our channel, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Share this free course with everyone you know. Let's make learning the violin accessible to everyone, and let's start a music making revolution. I would absolutely love if that became possible. Now, warning here, this is the most important video in this course so far. Don't jump around or skip this video. This is extremely important to your own violin journey, and then also this 7-day jump start to where we're playing our very first piece in 7 days. And so here we go. Let's begin. So why beginners struggle with tone quality? So most beginners think that a beautiful sound directly comes from talent. It absolutely does not. Okay, so talent is not necessarily the thing that creates a beautiful sound. And I hear it all the time that beginners and students that are just starting the violin, they hear their sound and they hear someone else's sound that's been doing it for a very long time, who's playing the violin for such a long time, and just, see something that they think is talent when it's really just an understanding of some really simple mechanics. Okay, and that's really what a beautiful sound comes from, right? Is really understanding these few mechanics that we're going to talk about today. So when you hear someone play with an incredible sound or something that sounds just so beautiful, their tone is soaring or lush and beautiful, it's not talent. It's just the control of these three ingredients that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so in a second, I'm going to demonstrate these three types of sounds. So like a scratchy sound, a weak sound, and a clear sound. Okay. And I want you to notice that I don't change anything about the violin. So I'm not picking up another instrument and trying to play. It's the same violin. I'm not changing out the strings to something defective or anything like that. And really the only thing that I'm choosing is how I use the bow. So the bow is exactly the same as well, but how I'm using the bow to play the violin. So specifically, um, how I'm changing some really specific things in order to create really specific sounds. So I'm going to jump outside of this presentation and then show you these three different types of sounds. I'll be right back. Okay, welcome back here. So I want to share these three types of sounds that I just talked about in the presentation. So basically, I want to show you what a scratchy sound will look like. Okay, now remember how we're going to put our violin in position. So we turn it, bring it out here, and then you can just hold it right here for now. I'm gonna just hold it like I normally do. And remember our bow grip here. So basically remembering that the thumb is either inside under the stick here by the thumb grip, or you have it down here on the silver part that we call the ferrule. And you have your two fingers in the middle with the ring finger on the eye, your middle finger just resting right there next to it, and then you have your pinky nice and curved on the tip of the pinky on the bow right on the top, and your index finger just nicely wrapped around. Okay, so with that review out of the way, let me show you basically what a scratchy sound on a violin will sound like, okay? So it's gonna sound something like this, right? So it's gonna sound really, really growly, kind of choked up, right? Now here's another. It might sound like that as well, okay? So that's basically a scratchy sound, okay? And then we have a weak sound that's something like this, right? So you hear like kind of a glassy, wispy sound, right? So that would be a very weak sound. But then we get into something like a clear sound, something like this, right? Or on another string. So a clear sound might be something like that, okay? Now, really, again, the only thing I want you to notice that I'm changing is how I'm using the bow. So specifically, and we're going to talk about these three different things that I'm using in order to read this, okay? So we'll go back into the presentation and carry on. All right, welcome back. We're gonna move on to the three ingredients of a beautiful sound, okay? So I'm very, very excited to show you guys about this because it's something that not a lot of beginners actually learn, and it's something that I think is introduced way too late in violin education. I personally didn't even learn it until I was going and studying at conservatory here in the United States, and yeah, it really changed everything for me. And when I teach, I try to introduce it as early as possible. So here we go. So the very first ingredient that we're going to talk about is bow weight. Okay, so some people say bow pressure. Either is basically exactly the same thing that we're really talking about here. Um, but bow weight is simply how much the bow is resting in the string, or basically um, being put into the string. So when I talk about bow weight, let me grab my bow here. So what really controls that in our bow grip is actually our index finger. So if we, I can actually, if I'm, you can see the bend here, right? So basically all I'm doing is pulsing with my index finger. I'm just really rotating and putting more weight onto the index finger, and it pushes down into the bow. And when we do that with our bow grips, we're essentially changing how much force gets pushed into the string itself, okay? And that's what we call bow weight or bow pressure. Now, some of this weight also comes naturally from the arm, from the bow arm itself, okay? And I'll show you that in a second as well. So I'm going to demonstrate what too much weight sounds like and what too little weight sounds like and what a balanced um, weight, I would say, sounds like, okay? And then I do want to share a common mistake that mostly happens with beginners is they think that pressing harder or putting more bow weight or bow pressure into the string will make a better sound. And oftentimes it really only creates more tension in your body. And I think this is a common mistake with beginners because um, a lot of times it's just, you know, violinists who are just starting out, they listen to recordings or see really incredible violinists play, violin soloists, and they have these massive sounds. They have, you know, they fill an entire concert hall with sound, or they're able to project over an entire orchestra. And so I think a lot of people think that they're just like, you know, pressing the heck out of their instrument in order to create this type of sound. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. And there's so much at play that and so much to factor in that it's not necessarily just like them pressing a lot to create this big sound, it's a little bit more nuanced to that. And so I think a lot of people get this misconception that if I just press harder into the string or use more weight or pressure, I'll be able to get the same type of sound. I'll be able to achieve that. But it's really not the case. There's so many other things going on, and we'll go a lot more into this. But it's better to create something more balanced and more consistent than trying to manipulate the sound to that degree. And so I just want to point that out early on, so that you're not necessarily trying to create something that is going to hurt you or cause, problems down the road. Okay? So I'm going to demonstrate these three different things, specifically with bow weight. That sounds like too much weight, too little weight, and a balance sound. Okay, so I'll step out of this presentation and be back with my violin. All right, welcome back. So here we are talking about bow weight and too much weight, too little weight, and a balanced sound. So let me demonstrate that right here. So if I use too much bow weight, we're gonna really choke the string, and it's gonna kind of like you're really trying to it'll just choke under all the pressure. So the string itself can only really support a certain level of weight until it starts to collapse, more or less, and the sound can't really it stops the string from vibrating naturally, and it starts creating this growly or extremely textured scratchy sound. Okay, and it sounds like this, right? It sounds like it's not a very pleasant sound. Okay, so you may get some of these sounds at the very beginning when you're like starting the bow, like pulling the bow across the string. That happens a lot with beginners, and so a lot of times it's because you kind of put the bow on the string and then you like want to press and then move. But sometimes if you just start moving the bow, you'll get a little bit more balanced sound. So you'll step away from that scratchiness. And now too little weight. So if we have too little weight on the bow, we'll get a very wispy, glassy sound. And I've kind of already talked about this, but it doesn't hurt to reiterate. Right, so this really like wispy, glassy type of sound. So I'm really just lightly going across the strings with the bow. And it makes that sound because there's not enough contact between the hair of the bow and the string in order to allow it to naturally vibrate. So there's two outer ends there. And so if we kind of like meet there in the middle of in terms of bow pressure or bow weight, we get a nice balanced sound. And so now I'm not really pressing into the instrument, but I'm also not being super light with it. I'm just trying to allow the natural weight of the frog and the bow itself, and my arm just kind of staying in a neutral position on the string, create a balanced sound. So I think it's important to try to create these sounds for yourself. So try to use too much weight and see if you can actually achieve that scratchiness, and then oh, okay, well that's what too much weight feels like. And then also try to use too little weight so that you also know what that feels like in your body. And then see where you can meet in the middle. Where is that middle ground where the string will speak very naturally and freely, and create some vibrance. How much weight does that really take? And yeah, so I think that's a really good thing to experiment with today. And just remember that the common mistake that I already talked about in the presentation about trying to press too hard or things like that in order to get a bigger sound. As you can see, it doesn't really correlate that way 100%. So one more thing I want to talk about before we get back into the presentation is actually this aspect of our upper arm level. So if we're on, saying, we've only really been playing on one string, one of the open strings, or maybe you've been experimenting playing with the other strings, which I think is really good, and you should definitely do that if you haven't already. But one thing I want to point out is something a little bit more related to our bow arm posture that I didn't talk about yesterday. And that's specifically that depending on where we are on the string, so if we're on the A string, let's say, so this A string, we do want this upper arm, so everything above the elbow, to really be at the same level that our bow is. And so let me show you when my elbow is too high. So if my elbow is too high, you'll see that it starts to be a little bit too much, or if it's too low, you can see that it's actually dropping. So that's really the sweet spot here. So whenever you change to another string level, we really want that to be maintained, okay? So the G string is a little bit off just because of the shape of our bodies, but it definitely shouldn't be like this, or it shouldn't be like that necessarily, okay? It will manipulate the sound a little bit too much. And this is too low, that's too high, this is just right, okay? And so if I'm kind of treating the camera as a mirror, and so if you do that where you have your own mirror and you point the scroll right towards the mirror, just like I am, and to the camera, you'll really see clearly where your upper arm is. So, and just kind of go through all of the string levels and see if you can, and if you make a little noise here or there, that's totally fine. See if you can keep this consistent, the upper arm consistent with the string levels as you change to other strings. Okay, I just wanted to mention that real quick because I realized we didn't talk about that yesterday, and it's a super important one that helps release a lot of tension in the body. Okay, so we're gonna go back to the presentation where we'll talk about the second ingredient to a beautiful sound. All right, welcome back. We are now going to talk about bow speed, which is the second ingredient in creating a beautiful sound. So bow speed refers to specifically how quick or how slow the bow moves across the string, okay? So that's basically when we talk about speed, we're actually talking about kind of like how quickly we're actually extending or contracting our arms when we're playing on the bow or on the violin. Okay, so depending on how fast or quick we pull the bow across the string, that will really determine what kind of sound we create. Okay, so I'll demonstrate in a second what a fast bow speed is and what a slow bow speed looks like and what a moderate bow speed would look like as well. Okay, so now a common mistake here. So many beginners will lose their straight bow geometry the most while they're using faster bow speeds. So make sure you maintain control. And I say a lot of this really happens in the upper half. So once you get really above the middle, so basically everything above this point in the bow, you really I see a lot of beginners and honestly some more advanced players too lose a lot of control and they're not really maintaining a straight bow. And we talked about this yesterday, and I can briefly re-explain it as well, just as a review. But I'm going to demonstrate these bow speeds now and come out of the presentation. So I'll see you in just a second. Okay, so let's demonstrate bow speeds here. So fast bow speed. A fast bow speed is going to be something like this. So if I just move the bow quite quickly, especially if I'm a little closer to the fingerboard where I'm placing the bow, we'll talk about what that means in a second. But if I do that, then we get this kind of a jolt. A lot of energy in the sound. If we go up bow, we can even have a little bit like that. Again, If you can't really make that kind of sound right now, that's totally fine. Super, super normal. And it takes a lot of action. It actually takes a lot of control in order to do that with a bow. So this is really just to demonstrate um, what it sounds like. So now, if I used a fast bow speed though somewhere else, it may sound a little glassy. So something like that. And so that can also happen. And you may, if you just try to do this now, you may have experienced that kind of sound. So now let me talk about a slow bow speed, and I'll also reiterate or talk about and explain why those two types of sounds happen with bow speed and how to avoid them. But let me go into the slow bow speed. So a slow bow speed, so just really moving it slowly, and depending on what where I am on the string, it may sound differently. But that's basically kind of a slow bow speed. So it's a really subdued, kind of, yeah, just a really subdued sound. And now a moderate bow speed. So I would say this is pretty moderate. Just pretty general moderate bow speed. And obviously there's outer ends to the fast and slow. I mean, you could go even slower, right? Where like the sound actually comes in and out of focus. Like that's pretty slow. Or you can go super, super fast, right? Where you're just like really going for it. Right? And it creates some kind of sound. But anyways, so that's more or less what bow speed and what it can look like. So the fast spectrum or the slow spectrum, and then really right there in the middle, which I think is really appropriate for this purpose now, is to really try to figure out what that moderate is. I think you should try to like do the fast bow speed and the slow bow speed just so you can feel that in your body and understand like what is really slow, what is really fast. And I think that's really important to kind of segment and to understand, so that you can really find that middle ground. And I think that's really the goal here for today, okay? So now remember, I just wanna remind everyone about the common mistake that a lot of beginners happen is just when they use fast, especially fast bow speeds, they do maintain, or actually opposite of that, they lose control of a straight bow, especially in the upper half. So really what I'm talking about is making sure that the bow isn't traveling across here or going this way. So this isn't necessarily straight, and this isn't very straight, but this is pretty much a straight bow. So you don't really want the bow to go either way like this. You really want it to travel in parallel with the bridge, okay? Great, okay, so I think that's pretty much where we're at for bow speed. I'm gonna jump back into the presentation and see you there. All right, welcome back to the presentation. We're going to talk about our third and final ingredient to a beautiful sound, and that is sounding point. Sometimes people call this contact point. They're really the same thing. For purposes of today, I'll just call it sounding point. But just so you know, it's also called contact point if someone else refers to it that way. So sounding point is where the bow plays on a particular part of the string itself. And I'm going to demonstrate this again in just a second, but I'll demonstrate what it sounds like if it's near the fingerboard, whether it's in the middle or near the bridge. And we talked a little bit about this just a second ago when we were talking about bow speed. And later on in this video, I'll talk about kind of the more nuances to all of this. And yeah, so if I get my violin here, so basically in terms of sounding point, more specifically, depending on where you're actually placing it on the bow, like, or placing the bow on the string. So you could place the bow like very close to the bridge, or you could place it very close or above the fingerboard, actually. And they have incredibly different sounds when you do that. And so it's really important to understand and also be able to control these sounding points when you're playing the violin. It's really, really important, especially for your sound. And I'll explain even more why, but um, this is one common mistake that I think a lot of beginners make, and they don't really consider the sounding point when they hear an unpleasant sound that they create. So they really just try to change the speed or weight, which will more or less get what you want, but it will be temporary because a lot of times um, I feel like most people can really feel the speed or feel the weight that they're using in the bow, but they can't necessarily feel the sounding point as much because the speed and weight is a really physical element that we're using with our arm, but sounding point is more of a position. So it's something that is a little bit harder to feel really specifically that we're creating or controlling. And so I think a lot of times people will just like change the speed or weight and disregard or just not have a think about sounding point as a first thought necessarily. So and oftentimes we can do a better job of keeping speed and weight consistent. I think we it's harder to actually keep a sounding point consistent. So a lot of times I hear people keeping a consistent weight or speed and then drift out of a sounding point that makes the sound different. And so they try to change the speed or weight in that moment, but it's actually not the culprit to the sound suffering. So that's just something I wanted to mention because I just see it time and time again. And it's better to just kind of, talk about these things before they happen so you can really keep an eye out on them. Okay, so I'm going to jump out of the presentation and demonstrate some of these sounding point changes. Okay, welcome back here. So I want to demonstrate some of the different sounding points that we have, okay? So again, sounding point is more or less where we're putting the bow on the string, okay? So just for purposes, I'm gonna put my violin out here like this. So we can have a sounding point really close to the bridge. I'll call this like 5, just to number it. And then maybe this is 4, this is 3, that's like right in the middle in between the fingerboard and bridge. And then 2, and then 1 is right next to the fingerboard. And so this is 1, and then the other extreme is 5 next to the bridge. 3 is pretty much in the middle, and then we have a 2 and a 4 kind of in between those other points, okay? So basically where we're playing will change a lot. So if I play near the bridge and use a lot of weight in the bow, it can have like quite, obviously it creates more sound. It's a more focused sound, I would say. Right, a light, like, especially on the open string, if I put down my fingers and perhaps use a little bit of vibrato, it would warm it up a little bit more, but it's a really focused sound, right? Now, if I play in a little bit too close to the fingerboard, right, it's kind of an airier sound, and slow down the bow. Now, if I speed up the bow, though, now it has a little bit more of a vibrancy to it, right? It has a little bit more of a color to it. So now if I play in the middle, I would also say that's pretty focused, but it has a little bit more of a dimension to it than it right next to the fingerboard, right? So these are some ways that we can really manipulate the sound, and it really affects actually the volume that we have. And so some of the most basic things when we're starting to work with sounding point is actually about volume. And so like if we get closer to the bridge, we will play, like it will sound louder. And if we play closer to the fingerboard, it will like more than likely be a lot softer. And so that's like a basic element to sounding point at this moment. I would try to see if, and I think it's probably best for today and also for this course, that you try to really play in the middle. So that 3 sounding point that we categorize. So basically right in between the fingerboard and the bridge. I think that's probably where you're going to get the most consistency and a really high quality sound for the purpose of this course. And also as a beginner, if you can really control one sounding point, that's like absolutely incredible and an amazing achievement. Actually, it takes a lot of people like quite a long time in order to be able to do that. But also a lot of people don't understand that that's a thing. So now that you do, you'll have a extremely high chance of being able to do that. That's more or less sounding point. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nuances of these 3 things and how they work together. So I'm going to go back into the presentation and we'll discover some of those things. All right, welcome back to the presentation. So now we're going to talk about why these 3 ingredients work together and how they work together. This may be actually one of the most important parts of these 3 things because it really defines, honestly, how a beautiful sound becomes a beautiful sound, okay? So this is extremely important. So none of these ingredients work alone. So speed doesn't work by itself, weight doesn't work by itself, or sounding point doesn't work by itself. A sound is always created by the combination of all 3, okay? And we have to consider all 3 while we are trying to create a specific sound or a beautiful sound, okay? So again, I'm going to demonstrate what this all means in a second. I'll kind of talk about how the adjustments of weight matter and how the adjustments of speed matter, and what that really requires in terms of trying to move the bow across a string and what that creates in terms of sound production. And I also want to talk about a little bit like why, the common mistake that most beginners make in all of this is that they really forget to maintain a straight bow. A straight bow is so important, and that's why I've been kind of harking on it a little bit here, because it really, if you don't have a straight bow, then you're not maintaining a consistent sounding point. And that will really affect kind of these 3 ingredients and the larger formula of sound that we're trying to create. Okay, so the more you can maintain a straight bow and be able to have a straight bow, the more success you're gonna get out of tone quality and all these other things. Okay, so yes, so I'm gonna jump out of the presentation one more time and demonstrate a little bit of how these all work together. Okay, so I'll see you in a second. Okay, so welcome back here. I'm going to demonstrate how these 3 ingredients work together. Okay, so if I use more weight in the bow, I have to get closer to the bridge. Now, why is that? So when I get closer to the bridge, I have to use more weight because of the tension that is happening on the string there. So the string loses more and more tension as you get further away from the bridge. Okay, so the most tension will be right here on the bridge itself. All right, and so it will just, in terms of physics in general, it will just take more weight in order for the string to speak, to be able to vibrate freely. Okay, so therefore, when I use with less weight, I need to get a little bit closer to the fingerboard. Okay. Now, if I just use a little weight by the fingerboard, since there's so little tension, it won't vibrate as much. And so we increase the speed at that point, okay? So there's kind of this balance between sounding point, speed, and weight. So if we're closer to the fingerboard, generally we have to use a slower bow speed, more weight, okay? And then if we're generally closer to the fingerboard, we have to use more speed, less weight, okay? That's generally the correlation here. And being playing by the fingerboard or by the bridge is really defining the sounding point there, okay? So that's how they all three are really working together, and it really deals with the amount of tension that the string has given how the violin is designed, okay? So let me show you a little bit here. So if I'm by the bridge, I really have to use a lot more weight, okay? I have to slow down the bow. So if I did that by the fingerboard, yeah, it's gonna make a really scratchy, growly sound. So I have to lighten the weight and use more bow speed. Okay, so those are generally the nuances there, and these aren't necessarily something that you need to be an expert on at this point, or be able to 100% be able to like control all these little things. It's just really, really important to know and to understand, so that when you have some impurities in your sound and you're listening while you're trying to learn the instrument, if things aren't sounding great or sounding, or creating sounds that you're really proud of, normally it's because, and almost all the time, it's going to be because of one of these three things, and how we're using them all together, okay? So I would like for you to understand that. So now if I use like a really fast bow speed by the bridge and less weight, we get a really glassy sound, right? And there's actually music that composers have written that require that kind of sound, and we call it sol ponticello. And it creates a really glassy sound, but for these purposes and for this course, we're really not gonna want to have that kind of sound. So if you are creating that, it's not really what we're going for at this moment. So really try to stay in the middle. So try to really stay in the middle here, in between the bridge and the fingerboard, and try to find a really great balance between speed and weight while using that sounding point, okay? So that we can really zero in and define that bass level sound. That's really the goal for today, okay? So I'm gonna go back into the presentation because there's a few other things that we need to get to that deal with the bow, how it's balanced, and some practice exercises. So I'll see you back in the presentation shortly. Hello, welcome back. Okay, so I would like to talk about some practice exercises for these three strokes. Okay, so three exercises for bow weight, speed, and sounding point. Okay, so basically, and I'll demonstrate these as well, but I would like for you to slowly pulse the bow with weight in one bow direction, okay? Now, the intervals of the pulse don't need to be quick. You can pulse for kind of a while, so like really use weight and then pulse off. So like on and then off for a while and then on, and do this slowly over the course of a bow. So like a down bow and then on an up bow. And so one repetition would be on one down bow, and then another repetition would be on an up bow. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And then for bow speed, do the same thing, but we're just going to basically use a fast bow speed and then a slow bow speed. So fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, something like that, okay? And then on one bow, I want you to try and travel through as many sounding points as you can. If you can just kind of get from the fingerboard to the middle and then back to the fingerboard, or just maybe to the fingerboard to the middle, then that's fine. That's totally fine. Or if you can get from the fingerboard all the way to the bridge, that's also amazing. And I'll show you again what that's going to look like in just a second here. And then we'll also do 5 repetitions of that. So I definitely want you to try these out today. And then also want to talk about a common mistake. Um, so for more bow weight, we have to play closer and I already described this, but we must play closer to the bridge. And then for more bow speed, we must play a sounding point closer to the fingerboard, okay? So this is very, very important. And a lot of people forget this and kind of, are trying to play something and, it doesn't sound the way they want. And they just, again, kind of start thinking, well, maybe I'm just not talented. It's not that at all. It's just really how we are able to control these three things, bow weight, speed, and sounding point. That's really all it is, okay? So I'm going to jump out of the presentation one more time and demonstrate these three exercises. See you soon. Okay, so here are the three exercises and what they look like, sound like. Okay, so again, when we use bow weight or pressure, really what we're doing is basically, and you'll see kind of the middle of my bow here, you see the wood start to press into the hair. So this is like a lot of bow weight when it's right touching the hair, right? And then this is almost no bow weight, right? So there are some levels to it all, right? And it's specifically how we are leveraging our index finger, okay? So we're either using a lot of weight in our index finger or not so much, or none at all. So basically, so you can hear kind of the strings start to, like a little bit too much weight that's getting put into the string, okay? So this is one of the purposes of the exercise is to really find what's too much, right? So we really are gonna be doing this on like probably the 3 or 4 sounding point. Yeah, so like either in the middle between the bridge and fingerboard or like halfway between the middle and the bridge. Not quite on the bridge here, but we can pulse it slowly or the speed that I did, but find your comfort zone in this. There is no way that it has to be at this point. If you just pulse it once and then and then release all the pressure or weight in the bow, that's totally fine within one repetition. So if it's something like that, that's totally fine. Or if you just like want to hear the difference between one movement in the bow as with pressure or more pressure than you normally would, and then some with almost no pressure, that's also okay. Again, we have to kind of find where we're comfortable doing and then build from that, okay? So don't try to do something that's way over the ability that you feel like today. That's not the goal with this. So really make it and curate it for what makes the most sense to you today, for now. That's what I like about these exercises and why I use them with beginners, because we can really meet them to the person and how comfortable they are with everything at this point. So again, all I'm doing is pulsing with my index finger over the course of the bow. So, and there's no rhythmic thing here. It's really just trying to feel that difference between more weight and a lot less, okay? So we're gonna do the same exact thing with bow speed, okay? And bow speed is basically okay? So we're basically just using more bow speed and then slowing down the bow quite a bit. So one thing that we really want to have here is basically, basically try to keep a sound in between the fast bow speeds and the very slow bow speeds, okay? So we don't want to have too many gaps and zero sound, basically. Even in the slow bow speeds, we do want to have some sound. Right, it will be faint, but we still want to at least be able to, hear what a slow bow speed will sound like, okay? So do 5 repetitions of that. Again, if you just want to do, 1 repetition of a fast bow speed and then slow. That's also totally fine. One thing I do want to mention is that sometimes when people are using bow speed, they're actually also using a lot of pressure. And so I really want to be clear that this should only be a speed exercise. So you should really not be using your index finger at all when you're making the bow quicker. So really be careful of that. I see that often where people are actually kind of like doing this when they're making the speed a lot faster, okay? So be careful of that. And then I want to share or show you rather the sounding points. So sounding point is basically, you can either start near the frog, or sorry, near the bridge and then go to the bridge, or go to the fingerboard. So either go to the bridge or go to the fingerboard, or vice versa. I usually like to start from the fingerboard and then go into the bridge. So it looks something like this. Okay, so now this is more or less just the sounding point exercise here. Now, if you're really uncomfortable with using your full bow, that's totally fine and actually quite normal at this stage. I mean, you've only been playing the violin for 2 days. Yeah, I'm not expecting everyone to be able to use their full bow today. So what you can do is definitely basically start in the middle, because this is normally where the sounding point gets the most uncontrolled. So start in the middle and just go to the tip and back to the middle. Or if you want to start a little lower in the bow, if that's more comfortable, and then go to maybe a little bit above the middle, that's also fine. If extending your arm out towards the tip is uncomfortable. Again, really create these exercises for your current comfort. Be in your comfort zone and try to, manipulate it so that you can still do this exercise within those confines. So let me show you, like if you're just more comfortable with the middle of the bow, it would look like this. Right? So basically, and when we control a sounding point, what we're really doing is moving our elbow backwards and then moving it forward as we're moving the arm and extending it, okay? So it's basically this back and forth motion that will create the changes in sounding point, okay? I'm doing these mostly on the open D string. You can use any open string and do the one that is most comfortable. If playing on the A string is way more comfortable for you, definitely do that. There's no requirement here for which string it should be on. Okay, so yeah, let me also demonstrate what just an upper half would look like for this. Okay, it would look something like that. Now, if using all the sounding points in once, like going all the way to the bridge and then back to the fingerboard, is a little much, that's totally fine. Also very, very normal for a lot of beginners. Just do like one trip, so maybe like only to the bridge. Okay, so only maybe to the bridge, rather than going all the way back and forth within one repetition. Or you can just do part of the sounding point. So you can just go into the middle, right? And then you can hold that one sounding point if you like. And then on the next bow, you can go back to the fingerboard. Okay, so you can really make these your own and kind of manipulate them so that they really fit what makes you feel like you're really going to grasp these concepts at this moment. That's why I like them so much. And so definitely, experiment with these. Do the 5 repetitions of each. It doesn't take very long. It'll take you probably a minute to do everything, or a minute and a half, perhaps 2 minutes at most. And yeah, so uh, that should be able to really categorize in your body what these different elements feel like. And the more you do it, the more they'll be comfortable. I used to do these about 3 minutes every day, like really not very much. But when it accumulates over a course of time, you really understand and can control them very well. So that's what I would recommend to you. And these will really level up your sound in an incredible way, especially as a beginner. And again, this kind of information does not get normally used this early on in your violin journey. So this is really amazing for you guys, and I'm super excited for you to get this information. So I am going to go back into the presentation because we have a little bit more to talk about. So I'll see you there soon. All right, welcome back to the presentation. We are going to move on to how to create a smoother, clearer tone. This is a really interesting aspect about bow balance, something that also isn't taught a lot to beginners, and I'm not really sure why, because it's super important, especially in sound development. So let's talk about this. So just a quick refresher here. So the bow does not weigh the same at each part, right? So um, when we look at the bow, the the frog, right, has all this attached to it, right? It has all the metal, all the fittings, the frog, this block of wood down here, and all the windings and everything. And this part is also just like a little bit yeah, there's just a lot going on down here. So obviously this part of the bow is a lot heavier than the tip, right? Because the tip has just, just a small little piece of wood up here that's really just like a third or fourth the size um, of the frog. And it doesn't have any metal fittings or anything. Well, some tips do have instead of something sometimes these are made out of ivory, sometimes they're made out of a composite type plastic material, the head plates, but there are some metal ones that people have. So sometimes there is metal up here, but it's never the same weight. It's always a much lighter, okay? So that really correlates to how we use the bow and how we have to manipulate some things in our bow grip to make it sound balanced. And I'll demonstrate all of this as well so that it's clear and show you exactly how to do that. So yes, I will demonstrate. So this is another exercise that we'll have for today. But let me just quickly talk about it before I demonstrate. So the key is to feel the shift of weight in the bow grip. So basically, when we are at the frog, we have to feel a little bit more weight in our pinky because that is the thing that is basically holding up the bow, right? So if you just hold out your bow with your grip without touching it, but then you hold now the stick with the left hand, and if you did this and let go, or just close, like feel like the bow would just drop, right? So again, if I'm just holding the bow now and I let go with the pinky, and I start to let it go, it's just gonna fall over, right? So that's because the pinky's job is to really make the bow a little bit more balanced at the frog. So when you're playing at the frog, you really don't need your index finger. It really doesn't provide the goal of the index finger or the purpose of it isn't really being used at the frog, right? It gets used when we travel away from the frog closer to the tip because the tip is so much lighter, we have to apply a little bit more weight in the index finger to maintain the same sound. Okay, so that's more or less what we have to do. So there are some common mistakes here that I'm going to talk about. I put them here in the presentation. So if the shift in weight is not smooth, so basically if we're at the frog and then we travel towards the tip and we transfer the weight into our index finger as we get to the tip, if that transfer isn't smooth, the bow has a tendency to actually bounce on the string. So this happens commonly, some students will just try to be playing whole bows and they're not really transferring any of that weight and their bow just starts bouncing out of nowhere. Like they're not really trying to do anything. A lot of that is because of the shift in weight. It's not very smooth and it's actually not at the right times either. And that's also a key to me as a teacher, that there's a lot of tension in the bow grip and the arm itself. And a lot of times when we have all those ingredients all together, the bow will just start to bounce, even though you're not trying to bounce it at all. Will just start bouncing out of nowhere. And so that's really, really, really important to watch out for. So if your bow is bouncing and you're just using, long, slow bows and it's just bouncing out of nowhere on the string, a lot of that has to do with this bow balance. And then also perhaps there's some tension in the hand, or your thumb is squeezing quite a bit, not relaxed enough. And so there's a lot of things like that, okay? So when we do this exercise, the main goal with it is to listen for the same sound quality from frog to tip, okay? It takes a lot of control, and so when we do this, or when you do it for the very first time, it's not going to feel comfortable. And if it does, amazing, but normally it won't. And so I'm just going to prepare you for that, because I think a lot of people, this is a pretty enlightening process, and some people start to feel a little overwhelmed together. But I have to say that it's normal for everyone once they kind of discover this element of the bow, that you just have to get your reps in. And the more you're accustomed to it, the much, much easier it gets, okay? So I'm going to jump out of the presentation one more time and demonstrate this bow balance exercise. All right, welcome back. So excited to show this bow balance exercise. I think it's wonderful. So basically what we want to do is, again, we're just open strings here. You can hold it right here where you normally do, for just the purpose of demonstrating. I'll just hold the violin where I normally do. So basically, so again, what we want to do is when we have the bow at the frog, we really want to feel the weight in our pinky, okay? And then as we travel towards the tip, we want to be able to shift that weight into the index finger. And what we're gonna use to tell us when to shift that weight, it's two things. One is we're gonna listen. And so as we get closer towards the tip, we're going to try to maintain the same sound, okay? So you'll feel your index finger applying a little bit more and more weight until you get to the tip. And then we can also kind of gauge through sight as well. So after we get kind of around to the middle, we know that it's pretty much time to start applying weight into the index finger, okay? So this is what it looks like, and basically the goal, again, is to maintain the same exact sound from frog to tip, okay? Okay, so that's basically what it is. You just want to, have a nice long bow that maintains the same sound. Now, again, if it's uncomfortable long bows right now, That's totally fine. This exercise isn't a necessary part. It's just something that I really want to introduce. So if you're ever in the upper half and you feel like the sound just keeps thinning out every time you go down bow. A lot of it has to do with this. So if the long bows are like full long bow is too much right now, a little bit uncomfortable, you can start in the middle and then just go towards the tip and just focus on applying more weight in the index finger, okay? And the bow speed shouldn't be fast. It's generally slow bow here, slow to moderate, like not too quick. And so that's one way that you can make it a little bit more comfortable for you. Now the other way, so this is a little bit more of a challenge. So basically, you can increase the challenge in this exercise by actually lifting up the index finger when you're at, so basically exaggerate the motion here. So lift up the index finger when you're at the frog, and then as you get closer to the tip, you lift up the pinky of the bow. So that looks like this. Okay, so I wasn't really watching my bow hand. I don't know if you could see it in the frame of the camera, but basically, really all you have to do is kind of like focus then on lifting up the fingers and really focusing on them that way. It's a little bit better of a way to like in your brain segmenting it, and it can be quite effective to do that part of the exercise. Right now, if that is a lot and you start feeling overwhelmed, simplify it as much as you need, all the way to basically just using your upper half and focusing on the index finger. And really the goal here is to be able to use any part of your bow and be able to maintain the same sound, so it doesn't get softer or get a lot louder or anything like that. Okay, so that's more or less the bow balance exercise and what to listen for. Okay, so I'll get back into the presentation and start to wrap things up. All right, welcome back to the presentation. Let's keep on going. So here we are at the end of day 2. So time to celebrate and also look at what our practice assignment is for today. So congratulations. This is a really incredible feat. You're in day 2. The first day you learned how to create a sound, hold the violin, hold the bow. You learned all about the instrument, how it creates sound, and now you're learning how to improve that sound. That is honestly a massive, massive step. There's a lot of information coming at you, and if you've gotten this far, congratulate yourself, because this is a massive achievement and something that you should be super, super proud of. I know this isn't easy, but this is something that, is totally achievable. And I've worked with so many adult students that make strides in this, and so keep sticking with this, keep getting in your reps, do the practice assignments, and you're going to reach your goal playing your first piece on the violin in just 7 days. Okay, so let's see what this practice assignment is. Okay, so practice assignment for the bow balance exercise is to play 10 whole bows on an open string, focusing on bow balance. So do what I just went over with you on 10 whole bows or half bows if that is a little bit of a stretch using your whole bow, and focus on the bow balance exercise. So basically this shift of weight and your bow grip. So Oh, yeah, and then maintain the same sounding point, which is right in the middle, or that three sounding point that we discussed earlier. Okay, so let's go and see what the accountability post. Record 5 open strings. Now, whole bows, it could be half bows, or whatever is the most comfortable. Just open strings, and really the goal with it is just to have a good quality sound. That's it. Nothing fancy, none of the bow balance things, but just or the pulsing with the weight or pressure or changing the sounding points or anything. Just open strings, 5 bows, and post it in the Skool community. I have some really specific instructions for that in the video description. So make sure you check that out when you post it. And yeah, we're at the end of day 2. So reach out if you have any questions, if you're feeling tension or something just doesn't feel right. Please shoot me a message if you have a question or something wrong like that. Or if you'd like to schedule a call with myself, we can create a detailed plan for you going forward with your violin journey. The URL is right there, robinsonviolinschool.com/start. You can also check out a little bit more about me on the website there. So you can totally poke around there on that and learn more about what I do and who I am. And yeah, congratulations again on completing day 2. This is a massive step forward. Celebrate for sure today. Get in your reps and sorry, I just went back there. Get in your reps and yeah, I'll see you for day 3.